Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. On the last episode of Massalia Tales, we made peace with the Sesatani, meaning our borders to the southwest were secured. However, some more shenanigans were going on over in the east. It seemed the Insubres were planning to attack. They'd positioned a large army on my border. We had a standoff for ages and I eventually just declared war on them to end the tension and decide the issue. The Insubres attacked me as I expected. It was a defensive battle with Xenon guarding an encampment. The enemy's advance was fairly easily stopped, especially because we had tons of cavalry outside the camp who attacked the enemy in the rear once they'd committed to the attack. Overall, the Insubres force was heavily wounded but not completely defeated. Its remnants plus the garrison force were stopping Xenon from taking their home base. I decided to do a very daring move where I'd attack them, deliberately getting myself surrounded in order to try and defeat one force before I fought the other. Let's see how that goes. Xenon's daring moves were as effective as they were risky. The weakened Insubres warbands had set up a defensive position to receive the Greeks before they reached their settlement at Genua. Xenon simply bypassed it and headed north, as if making for the mountains. The Insubres let down their guard and lost track of Xenon's army until it was spotted marching to attack their main army to the rear. This daunting attack put Xenon in between the Insubres camp and Genua, meaning he would be attacked from two sides. His plan relied on speed, defeat one force before the other arrived, but the Insubres moved much quicker than he had hoped. Here is Xenon's army marching in a sort of combined arms formation, ready to attack the first Insubres position on a hill in front of him. The goal, of course, is to try and defeat them before any enemy reinforcements show up. I've got a weird sort of formation with the main battle line on the right and a raiding style formation on the left. My intention was to occupy the enemy with the main battle line and then send in lighter infantry and cavalry to harass their rear. It's only going to work if the enemy don't attack me to the rear whilst I'm doing it. They're coming from somewhere in that direction down there. All I had to do was wait to see how quickly they would arrive. Unfortunately, they arrived really fast. They rushed onto the field and started running straight towards the main Insubres position. This prompted me to change my plan. I decided I would fight the reinforcements first. And the main thing that prompted me to do that was the giant hill advantage we're going to gain by fighting down this giant slope against the Insubres, who are wearing themselves out sprinting up the hill towards their main position. So it looked like this was a good opportunity to fight with these reinforcements. As I formed up to do so, the Insubres army that was here initially started moving. In particular, their general and bodyguard rushed down the hill, not towards me, but towards their own army. It seemed their general was abandoning the position on top of the hill to join up with the larger force currently on its way up. They weren't content to wait for their reinforcements to arrive, they were going to go and join them. I decided to try and attack the enemy general as he went by with my own cavalry. I took losses in my own camp and the enemy general didn't lose anything, so it seems he was just too cool to even react to me attacking him. He just moves on by. I get my men out of the way and let him go at this point and decide to simply focus on reforming, ready to receive him when he comes back. The downside is that the enemy infantry on top of the hill then started to move. They're going to try and link up the reinforcements as well, which means they're going to attack to my rear. Not very useful. In reaction to this, I positioned some of my cavalry on an extreme flank so I can attack them in the rear once they commit, plus got some light infantry to force them to commit to doing something and just hold them in place without allowing them to hit the back of my main battle line. The main line is now ready. It's a big long hoplite phalanx with a few missile units behind it. The enemy are making their advance in a very messy formation. Their front line is a mix of missile and light spear infantry charging up, and you can see from the tooltips they're already tired and very tired. They're not ready for battle. Even before the fight starts, my hill advantage is working out quite well. The enemy are going to face my fresh troops with their exhausted ones. Always a good start. You can see here I've got some slingers accidentally in front of the main line, now getting them out of the way. The enemy have a large number of archers in their army, and those archers are going to provide quite a strength because they can fire up into my hoplite phalanx, lock them in position by reducing their movement speed, and of course kill members of their units. Inconvenient, but once the enemy's main battle line gets in close, the AI will attempt to avoid friendly fire by not firing so much straight over the tops of their own heads into my men, since my line is very thin, so that's okay for now. A potentially dangerous situation as the enemy's rear attack, currently being held off by my lighter Gallic levies and a few units of javelins as well. The javelins are going to throw over the top, especially into these heavy swordsmen here who could rip through my Gallic levies if I'm not careful. Now, to get rid of all those enemy archers whilst they weren't doing anything, I attacked with a bunch of cavalry, went around the side and wiped them out really. The enemy didn't have anything trying to stop me from doing this, which meant I was free to push as many of their archers as I could out the way. Unfortunately, they had so many archer and slinger units I could only get a couple of them at a time with my limited cavalry, so the majority of them for most of the battle are still going to be active. I'm going to have to work my way through them one by one. Zenon himself is taking heavy archer fire and is beginning to lose men. The archers firing over the battle line into my reserves, quite inconvenient actually, though most of my reserves are just slingers at this stage, as Zenon is the only heavy infantry unit in reserve. My cavalry are starting to rout some of the enemy's main battle line by attacking them from the back, which is good news. The javelin and taking out the enemy's swords have done good work, and now we're going to finish off their rear attacking force by attacking them with swords and cavalry. The enemy do have spears in there, so the attack with cavalry is a little bit reckless. I was hoping that the shock of the attack would cause the enemy to rout so I wouldn't lose too many men. Here I've kited off the most powerful enemy sword unit in the main line because they were actually going to do some pretty heavy damage to my hoplites. So I used my cavalry to get them out of there. At the same time, all of the enemy's lighter infantry begins to fall back. It looks like a mass rout is happening, but this is not a true rout. You can see on the balance bar, the enemy are still technically winning, which means the majority of these routing units will probably come back from routing and rejoin the battle shortly. I started advancing after them, but the constant arrow fire is meaning my men are moving very slowly, and the fact I have them in a phalanx formation slows them down even more, so there's no hope of me catching the enemy units unless I risk taking extreme missile fire or simply break formation and sprint for it, which in the end is what I had to do.
«Ω γεννήματα άμυρα και ακάθατα, δεν μπορείτε μεν να υπερασπιστείτε τη ζωή σας, μα θαρώ δε πως είστε και ανάξιοι για αυτήν. Μην το χρόνο μας άδικα σπαταλάτε, αφού κάλλιστα θα μπορούσαμε να εκπαιδευόμαστε για την αντιμετώπιση ενός άξιου και ικανού αντιπάλου. Οδεύσατε πίσω στα τρύπες και καλύβασα που κατοικείτε και απαγγείλατε στους ομοίους σας ότι η άπειλε της κυρία αρχιμπόλης Μασσαλίας είναι σημείον του επερχόμενου αφανισμού σας. Της μέγαν ενόχληση θα έφεραν τον εαυτό μου για να σας απολέσω, να και μόνο το θέαμα της ζωής σας μου προκαλεί το γέλωτα. Θεωρώ δε πως θα μπορούσα να ανεβάσω κομμωδία, όπου θα προσκολώ γενιάδα εις πεδίο νέων, θα το ενδύω με λιγουστά κουρέλια, απορρίτως έτσι και την ελάχιστη αίσθηση καλεσθησίας που θα υπήρχε πριν από μια δεκαετία.
So the enemy indeed started coming back from their rout, and I got some units down to re-engage them. This time their general is fighting among them, inspiring them, but also giving me a chance to engage their general with my own spearmen, a potential opportunity to kill him, which is always welcome, of course. So a new blobby sort of fight is beginning to form. This time there's no clear battle lines as the enemy are coming back in a sort of loose ragtag way. There's this fight going on further up the hill where I've outflanked a big blob of enemy troops. The enemy troops are superior to mine, swordsmen who could win out against these hoplites, but the hoplites are more energized, got the enemy surrounded, and I've got my own missile unit supporting me as well. So those guys are going to start routing and falling back. We'll win out in this area, which will free up more units of hoplites to attack the enemy's main force, which is now reforming in front of my own messy formation. Some of the enemy regiments didn't come back because I managed to get some cavalry to start chasing them away. I don't have many cavalry left, so they're not going to be getting that many kills on them, but it does keep them routing since they're constantly losing men, so they're not going to come back to the fight, so that's still useful. You can see most of that missile units have come back to the fight, and they're now going to resume their very annoying position, firing over the tops of my men into my blobs. And because my formation is now less thin and is more deep, those arrows are going to get more hits and cause more of a problem. You see here, I've actually got my slingers fighting in melee by accident. I didn't notice this until I got the warning about a unit routing, looked at what it was and saw it was those slingers later on. Pretty inconvenient. So those hoplites who defeated the guys further up the hill are going to come down and start outflanking the main enemy position. Zenon, who was fighting in the main fight, had to be pulled out because he's already lost quite a lot of his guards. I believe 2/3 of his men remain though, but I still didn't want to risk it. But the problem is he's now taking heavy arrow fire. He's drawn the fire of all those missile units behind the enemy line, so I'm going to move him around, try and get him back into the fight, kind of, so the enemy will be less willing to fire in that direction because of friendly fire. You can see those slingers who I sent in are now on their way out, but that's not a big problem. They are not going to contribute very much to the fight. Now eventually I got my cavalry in to attack those enemy missile units, getting rid of them, meaning it's going to be a pure melee fight, which I know I can win, because my men are more energized. As I've said, we've got them surrounded, we're fighting downhill, the enemy are now beginning to chain rout. Even as they rout, my men are having a hard time actually killing them, just because of how Rome 2 works in routing. You can't slaughter men during the rout like you can in previous games, so many of these guys are going to escape from the rout, but of course many of them are going to be killed too, especially because those escaping are simply running into my cavalry straight away and facing more fights. So I am going to be able to wipe out a large number of the enemy troops as they run away. I want to try and kill as many as I can, because a lot of these units are part of the garrison at Genua, and if I can really deplete the garrison, there's a chance I can just immediately attack the city, if I have enough movement points that is, and attack it straight away. And even if I don't have enough movement points, I can attack it next turn and it won't have regenerated much. So that battle didn't go as I hoped it would, but thanks to that really nice terrain advantage, it still went really well and we pulled off a heroic victory for Zenon's forces. Let's see the results back on the strategy map. This defeat has left the Massalian army 450 men weaker, but of course we've destroyed over 3,000 enemy troops, and as I hoped, much of the garrison army at Genua has been defeated, meaning only a very small force will remain. So if I want to attack the city right now, there's not much the enemy can do to stop me. Both of its actual armies have been severely depleted as well. I'm going to release the captives since most of their units have disbanded anyway. Releasing the captives will have very little effect. The survivors are not in a position to do anything about my attack, so now is my chance. Seeing there's only a small garrison, I tried to attack, but actually I don't have enough movement points because of that crazy maneuvering I did just before the battle. So I'm going to have to wait one turn, although in one turn the enemy doesn't have a chance of regenerating enough troops to be able to stop me then either. Now curiously, as I progressed to the next turn, the Romans made an extremely cheeky move. They sent a single unit of horsemen to attack Genua. This gives them a giant advantage on the balance bar because my army is forced to attack the city at the same time. Extremely cheeky, because if I choose to take part in this battle, the Romans will take the city, but obviously it's going to be me doing all the fighting. I decline to help them and the Roman attack simply fades away. I'm not sure what happened to the Roman troops. So now moving into winter, we get news that the Rieti, a tribe to the east, has joined a war with the Romans. I think they're fighting with the Romans over Patavium over in the east there. For now I'm going to ignore that now because it's my turn to go and take Genua. I now have plenty of movement points, there's no garrison in the city, however the balance bar is extremely against me. At first I had no idea what was going on. Here's the reason, it's the Helvetii main force is somewhere out of sight but in reinforcement range of the city, meaning if I attack I'll have to fight my way through the Helvetii just to take it. I decided that my battered army isn't ready to fight another full battle against the Helvetii main force, which must be somewhere between Genua and Mediolanum, so I decided I'm going to fall back into Massalian territory so I can heal up a few of my troops. It is winter so I won't heal very many, but at least I won't be losing any either. I'll fortify the border just in case the Helvetii main force chases me. At least we're safe, but we've missed out on a chance to take Genua. I'm just hoping at this stage that another chance will rear itself very soon before they recover. Now I went into some diplomacy with the Romans. I managed to get them to accept a non-aggression pact in exchange for some money. I guess that's just how the Romans operate, because they weren't willing to do anything despite the fact they really liked me without any kind of payment being involved. I tried to get trade as well, but no deal, even including money, would allow them to trade with me for now. So moving forward, the Helvetii main force makes its appearance. You can see Genua has actually converted to the Helvetii's logo there. This is because of a sneaky confederation that is happening during this turn, which apparently hasn't affected the Helvetii yet, although they are the leaders of the confederation. We'll see that a bit later. For now, it looks like I've got an army to defeat. Zenon's encampment, with its slightly depleted garrison, must hold off this Helvetii force. It's got a good number of swordsmen, but also a good number of low-level spearmen, so I'm expecting a victory in this battle, despite the balance bar. 3 months ago, General Xenon marched east on a personal quest for glory, making the excuse that he needed to defeat the barbarian scum at our gates. And now word is that he has returned to his camp at Transylvania with a train of Massalian dead, and another band of barbarian scum is still raiding our domain. It's clear that Xenon has lost his nerve, lost his mind, lost his heart for the people of our noble city, and fights for his own cause now. All the while, the Polish Guard have kept our people safe and our country unviolated for years. I move that the council apprehend Xenon so he can face his crimes. I will shepherd the daemons in his stead.
May the gods grant us the strength to prevail against our foes and keep this place for our people. I will bend my every effort to this struggle, and I know you will do the same. We will hold.
So we're ready to defend the camp. I'm not going to show too much of this battle because it's very similar to a recent battle against the Insubres, defending a camp in this very location, in fact, against a very similarly composed army. The enemy are coming right at us from a southerly direction. They've brought with them a rather formidable looking unit of deers. We'll see whether they make any difference to the battle. The enemy are simply going to attack in the same way that the Insubres did, in a typical barbarian fashion, coming right in to do battle with us from the front. Of course, these lighter spear units have almost no chance of getting through a hoplite phalanx fighting from the front. My men won't kill them particularly quickly either, but at least the enemy aren't going to get inside the camp. So the enemy attack from the south and the east with two groups, the eastern group involving more swordsmen, although I think both of them were quite mixed with spears and swordsmen. The thing is, they didn't attack me from the western entrance, which means these forces are free to now come outside the camp and go around and help the guys on the southern side by attacking the enemy from the rear. So this means victory is going to be easier than I expected. At the same time, my cavalry, which once again I've put outside the camp, is going to maraud around and take out the enemy's missile units early on to minimise the damage they're going to do. All the while, I'm not worried at all about these fights happening in the gate entrances. I know the enemy won't break through, so I can just have faith in my hoplites to hold them off for a very long time, at least until I can get forces to attack the enemy from the rear and start evening the odds in this part of the battlefield. So my cavalry are going to rush those enemy missile infantry, like I said, and get rid of them. There's 3 regiments to destroy and 3 regiments of my own cavalry. How convenient, they won't last long against those quick medium cavalry charges. So I don't have to worry about them anymore. Next, I get my cavalry to attack the enemy swordsmen on the south side to the rear. The enemy swordsmen are very vulnerable to cavalry charges to the rear, and you can see they start to break immediately. Unfortunately for them, they're breaking in the direction that my reinforcements from the west side are coming around in, meaning they're going to run straight into this other battle line and be killed, which in some ways is actually bad for me because it's delaying my own troops reaching the actual fighting from the other units who didn't rout, which means my hoplites inside the camp are going to be put under undue pressure by the fact my men are being forced to slaughter these fleeing enemies. At least killing them means they're not going to come back from routing and give us any nasty surprises later on. Plus, the more we can destroy of this Helvetii army, the less of a threat they'll be after the battle, and the more likely it is that we can simply settle with them in some way, or of course go on and still take Genua, which is still the objective in my mind. We'll have to see how this battle goes. I sent some hoplites to attack some of the enemy's lighter spears from the rear over here, finally getting around the enemy's routing units to attack some of their combatants. The enemy weren't too fussed about being attacked in the rear, so they're not actually going to break as a result of this engagement. These lighter spear units actually held on for quite a long time, even being attacked in the flanks and by superior units. Eventually it was my swordsmen who excel against these lighter spears who pushed them back and started cutting them down one by one, gradually edging their formation out of the camp and clearing out the way for Xenon and his hoplites to come and do battle with them as well, which then began to inflict heavy casualties on them. So eventually they did break, seeing that their men were going to be killed if they stayed behind. A few of them actually did stay behind even as the rest of them broke, which I thought was quite remarkable. And only for a few seconds they just fight on against my superior numbers in the area and then get out of there. So the south part of the battle is essentially won. All of the guys who are fleeing are being run down by my cavalry, so there's no chance of them coming back from routing. That means that after this phase of the battle, I can simply focus on going round to the east where the remaining enemy forces are. According to the balance bar, the fight is now even, although in my opinion, it's very much in my favour. I guess the enemy does have a lot of troops, but they're all bunched up fighting my hoplites in the eastern entrance. The hoplites are doing an excellent job of holding them off. I had to get my militia hoplites in there as well because I was taking losses and the lines were thinning out. There's this huge enemy horde still waiting to get in, but of course here comes Zenon and his men coming around the corner, ready to start a new battlefront which the enemy forces will not enjoy or appreciate. I charged right in, Zenon himself leading the charge with his sword there. Hoplites aren't exactly the ideal unit for a charge. They have almost no charge bonus, which means they're not actually going to do any damage by charging into these men. The enemy will just receive the charge peacefully and then begin fighting with my men. But the fact I've attacked the enemy along a big flank and opened up a new battlefront worries them, especially because some of the low morale sword units are not really willing to be attacked from two sides. I use another unit to attack the enemy's column in the rear, and at this point the entire enemy army routes, a huge chain rout all together. All these hundreds of remaining soldiers begin to flee, but of course I have plenty of cavalry around and local infantry who are going to chase down these fleeing barbarians and try and inflict as many casualties as possible. I'm going to take this opportunity to completely remove the threat from this Helvetii horde, and quite frankly there's not much chance for the retreating men. The cavalry will simply annihilate them. The enemy do have a few cavalry left of their own, but they're not hanging around to help out this huge horde of their fleeing kinsmen. So the Helvetii threat to Massalia is eliminated for now. This battle is completely won. It ends in a heroic victory for the Massalian forces. But the real question that remains is, can I take Genua? And moreover, what is this new Celtic confederation that appears to have confederated especially against me? Will it prove problematic? And will there be any more threats coming from either the west, the north or the southwest? So many potential enemies. We'll find out next time. For the people of Massalia, the winter of 266 BC was moderate and hopeful. The thought that in the coming year their city would see even further prosperity created a sense of pride matched only by their admiration for the figurehead of this new era, Zenon. But the reality was that Zenon's campaigns had only highlighted them as a threat. To the east, the Alpine tribes put aside old grudges to see the harassing Greeks pushed back home, while to the north, a silent build-up of a Gaulish kingdom that unified hundreds of tribes was almost complete. These kings saw the riches of Massalia as the ideal jewels for their crowns.